Greetings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Again, a joy even to meet you through this time of meditation. Even today, we'll be meditating in the 10th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. This 10th chapter is it's a wonderful chapter in its own unique way. That is, we see a set of teachings in this particular chapter which was addressed mainly to the disciples of Christ. That is to his disciples, even to the future disciples, that is to you and me. But there are no common people were not involved here. Now we saw in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus went up to the mountain. First, he started teaching to the disciples, but slowly people started gathering around. But here we see right from the start to the end, we see Jesus just talking to his disciples alone. So these were basically uh, special commandments, that if that is the right word that I may use. For example, when you look at verse 5 of chapter 10, that these 12 disciples, these 12, Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying. So this particular chapter doesn't have any kind of miracles in it, but they all, if you use a red letter Bible, you will find out this particular chapter, verse 6 to the end of the chapter, verse 42, it will be in red letters. It was fully the words of Christ, it was fully the teachings of Christ, and it was mainly to his disciples. Like the first four verses, it writes it has the written names of the 12 disciples, and then in verse 5, these 12 were given a power, were commanded before Christ sent them out. First they were empowered. Look at verse 1. He gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and heal all kinds of sickness. And then comes the names of the disciples from verse 2 to 4. And then first he gives them power, then he commands them what to do. Power alone is not enough. Today many people, they want the power of God, but they do not want the commandment of God. Jesus, of course, he empowers them with the Spirit of God to do miracles, to drive out demons, but it doesn't stop there. After empowering them, then starts the next process, that is the commandments. So from verse 5, we see Jesus commanding his disciples. And look at the end of the chapter, the very next chapter, the first verse. Now it came to pass, Jesus finished commanding his 12 disciples. So these completely, this chapter is dedicated to the commandment of Christ. Now, before we go into these commandments, before we go into what commandments that Jesus gave, we will try to read out the 12 names of the disciples from verse 2 to verse 4. It starts with Simon, who is also called Peter, who Jesus renamed as Peter, and his brother Andrew, and then the two brothers James and John, the sons of Zebedee, and then comes Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, who came to India, and Matthew, the tax collector, who wrote this gospel, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, and then comes Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So these are the names that we come across on the 12 disciples. So it is also mentioned in the other gospels. And now begins the teaching. So Jesus begins with the first instruction. You remember uh, in the last chapter of Matthew, be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth. First, Jesus begins with Jerusalem. Then he goes to slowly the boundary, like a ripple effect, it goes. He doesn't start from the ends of the earth. He starts with Jerusalem. Look at verse 6. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. Look at verse 5. Do not go into the way of Gentiles. Do not enter into the city of Samaritans. He first says, first go to our people. Go to the people among where you live. First go to Jerusalem. Go to the lost sheep of Israel. Go to them. That is Judea. Go there. Then as you go, say, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The same message that the first message that Jesus preached, and also the same message that John the Baptist preached. And then in verse 8, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. And then he goes on to say a very important line. Uh, the I should be the This should be the statement of all missions. Freely you have received, freely give. Freely, but the problem today is no one has received freely, so no one is ready to give them freely. But Jesus says, freely you have received, freely you give. And then he teaches them about a life of faith. Look at verse 9. Provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts. Don't take bag for journey. No, don't take two tunics, sandals, nor stars, for a worker is worthy of his food. So don't worry. Literally, Christ is saying, don't take anything. But in another part in the gospel where Jesus says, when you go, take money for you on the way. Here they were going among their own people. So basically, what Christ was telling is, don't waste your time by packing and trying to raise sponsors. Come on, go in faith. Today, uh, when people today's missions, when they try to do something for God, they spend more time in planning. They spend more time in trying to raise sponsors, that they miss the most important part of evangelism. They miss the most important part where they have to revive the lives of the lost ones. Jesus says, okay, don't worry about that. A worker is worthy of his wages. It is God who will meet your needs. It is God who will provide. Don't worry. Just go. The planning part is important. I'm not undermining planning. I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan. For example, look at verse 11. It says, whatever city or town you enter, inquire. First, inquire. Find out what is happening in that town. Find out if somebody is worthy in it, and if somebody is worthy, then you go into their household and greet them. If the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if they reject you, if they will not receive you, if they will not hear your words, then depart from that house, depart from their city. Don't stay there. Don't try to force anything. God is a gentleman God. He doesn't force anything. If people are not going to receive him, he just says, okay, move out of it, shake off the dust and move out of it. And he says an opportunity was given to them, but they rejected it. So he goes on to say it will be more worse for them than for the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. So it is very sad that these people lose the. You remember this town which lost its peaks, and finally they lost Christ also. Jesus compares it to them. It will be more tough for them. You will find later where Jesus was talking about how tolerant, how great a struggle that these people will have. And then after sending them, after talking them how they should go, then he says them, behold, I send you among sheep, like sheep in the midst of wolves. When you go out there, you will see wolves there. You will find false teachers there. You will find false prophets there. You will find ravenous wolves who will try to devour you. And that is where he says a very beautiful sentence. Therefore, be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. Be wise, be cunning. Another version says, be cunning as serpents, but innocent as doves. A dove doesn't go and start a problem. It doesn't instigate. It doesn't begin a problem. It just minds its business. It says, be innocent like doves. Don't go and create a fuss over anything. Don't go and create any problem with it. Just keep doing your business. But at the same time, also be wise as serpents. When you go through all throughout the scriptures, you will see the serpent is compared to a cunning nature. Look at Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. A serpent was more cunning than all the animals. When Paul was talking about it, look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3. Similarly, in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9, when John was writing about it, again he says, the old serpent which was cunning, which was trying to deceive the world. So here says, be wise, be wise. It's very important. Don't say that people cheated me. Be wise. It is very important that though we are like doves, though you may be very innocent, but at the same time, don't be a simpleton. In other words, don't be an idiot. Sometimes, though we are innocent, though we are harmless, at the same time, we also need to be wise. Wise in our actions, wise in our words, what to do and what not to do. Beware of bringing it to a balance. I'll always tell you, Christian life is all about balance. We need to come to that midpoint where we will be ready to do, where we will be in all areas. And after saying this, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Then he goes on to say, talk about persecutions. Talk about when people will bring trouble upon you. Let's see, they will deliver you to council. They will beat you in their synagogues. Imagine They will beat you in their synagogues, not just outside, but even in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. Jesus was sending them to the lost sheep of Israel, but then he goes on to say, they will bring you before courts and they will beat you so that you will be a testimony not just to these guys, but even to the Gentiles. When you read these verses, you will find Apostle Paul went through everything. Went through everything. And then he goes on to say, when they make you stand in courts, when you do not know what to say, don't worry. Look at verse 19 and 20. Your word will, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. When you read Acts of the Apostles, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, you will find when Peter and his disciple, when Peter and all the other 10 disciples, when they were brought before all the church elders and all the authorities, when they do not know what to speak, these guys were the ones who were weaklings. But that time they will say, whom do you think we should obey? Should we obey or should we obey God? Who's more important, you or God? Where did they get all this boldness from? That is what we say it was during the Pentecost. Yes, it is true, but here Christ foretells it. Here he says, for it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. They get this boldness, this spirit of boldness, this spirit of wisdom, what to speak, when to speak, where to speak, how to speak. And this is where here Christ, he almost like prophecy said, you will not speak, what you should speak will be given to you in that hour, and it is not you who are speaking it, but it is the Spirit of God who speaks through you. So it says that then it talks about how parents will be against children, children will be against parents. It all at the end of time's persecution. And then in verse 22, you will be hated. You will be hated by all for my name's sake. But he who endures to the end, that is the end of our lives or end of the ages, but ye who endures to the end will be saved. And then comes something very, very controversial. Look at verse 23. When they persecute you in this city, flee to another. This is not a cowardly run. When somebody persecutes you in one city, it says run to another city. No, oh, I shouldn't run. No, I should stand and fight. Sometimes God will ask you to stand, but sometimes God will say run. This is not a cowardly run, cowardly flight, but a wise act to further the gospel. Imagine a pastor, there is a persecution, a pastor or a worker, he stays there. If he's going to get killed there is no use of his life in that town or another town. Sometimes they will be called as martyrs. I'm not saying no, but sometimes it is wiser to run just for the furtherance of the gospel, so that gospel can be preached in another town. That's what it says. When they persecute you in the city, flee to another. For assuredly I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That means you will travel so much, even if you travel to all the cities. In other words, the meaning of this verse is this: there will still be cities who are not yet evangelized. I want you to read this verse more clearly. Take time, pause this video, and read it more. You will understand this. So, and then after talking about persecution, first he begins by talking about what to take in the travel, and how you should what you should do when you reach a city. And then he says how we need to be wise, how we need to speak. And then he says that what to do when they put you to stand before officials, what to speak and what not to speak, and how you will speak. And then he says that you will be hated about persecution. And then he goes on to say, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for a disciple to be like his teacher, a servant to be like his master. So don't try to exaggerate. In other words, Christ says, don't try to exaggerate, just be who you are. And then he goes on to say, 26, do not fear them, for nothing is covered. The reason why Christ says is don't exaggerate, just be who you are, it is because they called Jesus as the prince of demons. Now he says, if they called me as prince of demons, how much more they will call you. So don't exaggerate yourself, just be who you are. Don't try to rise above your potential. And then after that, still he further talks on persecution. Imagine, he is talking only to the disciples, people who have been sent to preach the gospel. He continues this talk about persecution. Look at verse 28. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear God. Fear him who is able to destroy both soul and the body in hell, that is Gehenna. So he says, don't worry, or do not fear for those who can just kill your body. If you want to die, let you die. You will get a great reception in heaven. And he goes on to say how much they are valued. Are not the hairs in your head numbered? Are not sparrows to sold for 2 copper coins? Are you not more valued than the hairs? Are you not more valued than these sparrows? Do not fear, you are of more value. You are of more value. Now, after talking about all these persecutions, from verse 32 and verse 33, Jesus says, in spite of all this persecution, Christ says, you should confess me before men. If you deny me, I will deny you before the Father. If you confess me before men, I will confess about you in front of my Father. So he literally helps them. He literally guides them how to face persecution and what to do at the face of persecution. And then he also encourages them. And if you look at verse 40 to 42, he even encourages them. He who receives me receives the one who sent me, and he who receives a prophet will get a prophet's reward. He who receives a righteous man will get a righteous man's reward. And then he goes on to say, if any one of these little ones are given a cup of, anyone gives any of these little ones a cup of cold water, he shall buy. Even if you give them a cup of water, even if somebody gives you, that's what he's trying to tell his disciples, even if somebody gives you a cup of cold water, though their reward in heaven will be great. So Jesus was talking about, he was encouraged them, he was talking them, he was commanding them, teaching them how to face persecution, what to do at the face of persecution. But in all this, from verse 34 to 39, he was talking about remember, he's talking to his disciples, whom he's sending out. And this is where he's trying to bring the difference between uh, a disciple and a believer. Remember, I'm not talking about the differences between a believer and a non believer. I'm talking about a difference between a disciple and a believer. There are many believers, but there are few disciples. Where a believer is something who just believes and sits in his place. A disciple is something who believes and yet he's ready to follow Christ. He's ready to lose anything for the name of Christ. And from verse 34 to verse 39, you will find this very, very interesting and controversial passage where Christ will say, do you think I came to bring peace on this earth? I did not come to bring peace but a sword. We call Christ as a Prince of Peace, but here Christ is saying, I did not just come to bring peace, but I have also come to bring sword. What is that sword? I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And then he goes on to say, a man's enemies will be those of his own household. His own household will be against him, where they will not accept him. And then he goes on to say, he who loves his father or mother more than me is not trustworthy of me. He who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. So, three things what a man is not worthy of. If you don't take the cross and follow him, take his cross, not Christ's cross. You need not carry his cross. We have to carry our own crosses. He is not worthy. If I love my children more than Christ, I'm not worthy. If I love my parents more than Christ, I'm not worthy. In other words, he says, I want you to put me as a first priority. I am your first priority. Don't play any games. Just put me. This is, I would call this as the tests of discipleship. Tests of discipleship. I want to present to you 10 tests of discipleship. I found this in the Dake's Bible. 10 tests of discipleship. It begins like this. Those 10 tests. First one is worldly persecution. That is one thing. Can we withstand it? Next one is fearless preaching. In spite of it, can we fearlessly preach? Another one is fearless consecration. That is holiness. Can we live a fearless holy life? Another one is fearless faith. Fearless faith. If you have a Dake's Bible, you can go through them. It has with the biblical references. Another one is bold confession of Christ, confessing Christ boldly. Another one is persecution of family, family persecution. Even when the family persecutes you, can you still stand for the Lord? Putting God first. Can we put God first? Bearing the cross daily, daily, every day. Our own cross, following Christ. And the tenth one is denying self, denying self. So yeah, here Christ talks about uh, how one he verse 39. I want to finish with this. He who finds his life will lose it, but he who loses his life for my sake will find it. You will find a very similar statement in the Gospel of Mark. I want to read to you this verse even before I close. Mark chapter 8. Jim Elliot, the great missionary who died, I think it is the Aqua tribes who went to preach there, but he died there. And this is what he says: for whoever decides to save his life will lose it. Mark 8:35. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel uh, will save it. Jim Elliot writes that he is no fool who is ready to lose what he cannot gain to gain something that he cannot lose. I think that is the exact statement here. If you find your life, you might lose it, but if you lose your life, you will surely find it. Dearly beloved, this chapter 10 is a very sensitive and very specific chapter just for the workers of the Lord, people who are ready to follow Christ and who are ready to obey His call. I know God has called you. You're not just, don't be just a believer, move to the next level where we can become. There are too many believers. Believers, don't be a spectator, become a player. Please read through these verses. Jesus talking about persecutions and how to handle it, how to speak, how God will give us a spirit of what to speak, how to prepare for our journey, what to do when we go there, how fearing God is more important than anything else. And then how even if you give a cup of cold water, if you receive a cup of cold water, and they will not lose the reward. May God speak to you more, and may God help us to serve Him more and faithfully, very loyally follow Him at any cost. May God bless you.